Again, okay, we're on page 115. We're looking at the Pontifex Maximus. This is the connection between the Church of Pergamos and the seat of Satan. When we read about that in the book of the Revelation, the seat of Satan, um, it is through this title of the Pontifex Maximus, because this represents the highest office in the pagan mystery religions, and how it was brought into the churches of that day, uh, and ending up compromising churches, ending up defiling the churches as well. Okay, so paragraph 270, the highest claim to papal power as Pontifex Maximus would actually come in the time of Gregory the Seventh in the year 1000, between 1073 and 1085, during his reign. And that's when you're going to find it at its highest point. We want to remember that in the early church, you didn't have anything where you had anybody claiming any power over others. This is something that gradually developed in churches, gravitating towards having a central authority. And then Rome being the political power of its day, it was very natural for the church in that period, the church at Rome, to have that kind of influence. And it is going to start here, where the title Pontifex Maximus is being carried forward. Okay, so this would where it would be maximized is going to be during the time of the papal monarchy. Yes, sir. In my chart, okay, I don't see Pergamos listed here. Oh, right there. Okay. Yes, that is the city of Pergamos, not the church. Okay. Right. Yes, this is all going back much further. Okay, we'll get into it. We'll be explaining that. Okay, so when it was at its highest development is when the Bishop of Rome, uh, uh, with the title of Pope, is going to claim a universal spiritual and temporal power. By temporal power, we mean the seat of government, secular power. This was something that sort of went back and forth, and there would be a vying for power between the emperors that would come later on, and the popes, and so that would be a big political thing. But finally, at this point with Gregory VII is when you're going to get his claim of power over the governments as well. This is one of the reasons why there was a lot of concern when John F. Kennedy was elected as president. One of the concerns was, especially because of, they were still very much in tune with the Catholic Church having power in Europe, and there was still this lingering sense of power that they had. There was the idea that if you were a Catholic, you had your primary allegiance to the church over earthly institutions, and they were concerned that there would be an undue Catholic influence in the U.S. government because of that. So that's something that's really still coming up within our recent history. Now, for us, I think that that's not as a big an idea. It's not a big or a problem or fear that we have to worry about. Okay, so the pontifical claims evolved from the paganizing influence of sanction of the Roman government, because the Roman government sanctioned Christianity and sanctioned other religions. This enabled the other things that were part of the Roman government to then become blended with the church. And so now we see on the chart on the screen, I just added this just as we were beginning class. I just thought, oh, I should have this on the screen. You will notice reference to the Etruscan influence, and with the Kingdom of Rome. Then you would have the Roman Republic. This is a little bit of history that nobody ever really gets, right? Okay, before there was the Roman Republic, there was the Kingdom of Rome, and then it would turn into the Roman Empire. During this Roman Republic, Satan's seat would be transferred to Pergamos, as in the Roman Republic, they gained power over the city of Pergamos. And then finally, that seat would be transferred to Rome itself, Satan's seat. That would be the official seat of the pagan mystery religions. And then we're going to see that it evolved with then the Caesars using this title, Pontifex Maximus. And then at this point, at the end here, between 300 and 500 AD, from Damascus on, this is Pope Damasus, popes would use the title Pontifex Maximus. So the evolution was that there would be the influence of the pagan mystery religions, the Babylonian mystery religions, and until finally the title was transferred to the Pope himself. He claimed the title. Okay, so page 116, we look at the Etruscan influence. What is Etruscany? Okay, so we have another thing there for you. Okay, you can see here, you can tell this is Italy. Okay, we don't see enough to be able to see that boot there, right? But you can tell it's Italy because you have Rome right there in the heart. The Etruscans were up in the north here. You did not have the Roman Empire at this time. Okay, what you had was the Latins that were down here from Rome and on down. And so these were two separate powers that were in the area there. You can see the Sabines, the Umbrians. These are maybe some terms you've seen before in the past. Some of these others maybe not. So you did not have the Kingdom of Rome at this point. Bring it back to... should be showing. There you go. Okay. Okay, so paragraph 271, the development of the Pontifex Maximus and its incorporation into the Roman Catholic system traces back to antiquity. We'll pick up its history with the founding of the Roman Republic, since the Roman government was the connection to the Roman system. So paragraph 272, the Roman historian Plutarch wrote that the second king of Rome, Numa Pompilius, way back in the 700s BC, he forbade the making of images, and that for 170 years until 540 BC, no images were allowed in the Roman temples. And when I read that, I thought that was very interesting. Roman temples had no images. While Rome was a kingdom, they were under the influence of the Etruscans. Remember, the Etruscans were immediately to the north of Rome. After Rome became a republic in 509 BC, the Etruscans ultimately became dominated by Rome by 396 BC. So the Republic of Rome dominated the Etruscans. It was in this political setting that the title Pontifex Maximus was being established. And so we look at the first bullet point there, the Etruscan influence. The Etruscans had an influence on Roman religious practices, including the development of the office of the Pontifex Maximus. The Etruscans had their own religious hierarchy, and elements of their religious system were incorporated into early Roman religious structures. So we're starting with their influence on Rome, their religious structures. The next bullet point, early origins. The title Pontifex Maximus is believed to date back to the early days of the Roman Republic. It was one of the highest religious offices in ancient Rome. The pontifices, the plural of pontifex, were responsible for overseeing the religious practices of the state. Can you see where this influence is going to now come in with the Pope having the religious influence on the affairs of the state, including the maintenance of religious traditions Okay, does that sound familiar also? Rome, the Roman Catholic Church with its traditions maintained by the Pontifex Maximus. The regulation of ceremonies and the administration of religious institutions. So the idea of having a pope who would be overseeing the spiritual activity of the church, this is where it's coming from, rather than having churches controlling themselves. So then you move up into the Republican period. That's over here. You see it here, the Roman Republic. During the Roman Republic period, from 509 to 27 BC, why 27 BC? Because that's when the Caesars take over. Okay. So during the Roman Republic, the title Pontifex Maximus was a prestigious position. It was typically held by a member of the Roman aristocracy. And so the pontiffs were responsible for maintaining religious order, interpreting religious law, and managing the calendar. Okay, that very same practice is what is coming to Rome, because you've got saints' days, you've got got your Lenten season, you've got your Advent season, you've got your ordinary time in the Catholic Church. Right now, most people who are ex-Catholic recognize how you were told, yeah, you can read the Bible, but it had to be interpreted by the priest or interpreted by the church. You couldn't interpret it for yourself. Of course, that was backlash against the Reformation period, where people were starting to read the Bible more, and the more they read the Bible, the more they wanted to leave Roman Catholicism. So of course they want to say, no, only the priest can do this. Then Julius Caesar held the title of Pontifex Maximus during his lifetime, starting in 63 BC. This was part of his political maneuvering to solidify his authority and appeal to Roman values despite the evolving political landscape. And so this Pontifex Maximus is now gravitating towards being within the power of the Roman leader. Paragraph 273. The Pontifex Maximus became united to the head of government under Julius Caesar. The role of Julius Caesar triggered the end of the Roman Republic, turning it into the Roman Empire. Julius Caesar's adopted son, Caesar Augustus, instigated the cult of Caesar, and he promoted the imperial cult, establishing a divine identity for the Caesars, which was very compatible with their role as Pontifex Maximus. So you can see everything's being pulled together. Under Caesar Augustus, there was a sense of the divine. This is why Christ, one of the things that Christ was crucified for, one of the claims that the Jewish leadership had, when they were saying we have no king but Caesar, what they were doing was actually pagan. This was like totally opposite to what they stood for. They, under ordinary circumstances, the Jews would have hated to have any caving in to the Roman occupation. So because when they were doing this, when they said we have no king but Caesar, what they were doing was recognizing the divine authority of the Caesar. So you can see when you come to the crucifixion, there's an awful lot more that's going on than just getting crucified. There are an awful lot of political things that were at play, a lot of religious things that were at play that were going on behind the scenes there. Okay, so then we come up with the Pergamos connection. Paragraph 274. Okay, so we want to say, you notice there the big idea, the connection of the Pontifex Maximus to the Babylonian mystery religion. So we're looking for that connection now. So the sovereign pontiff of Rome, influenced by Etruscan idolatry, was a branch from the original Babylonian system, but not its true representation. The legitimate Babylonian pontiff's seat was actually outside the Roman Empire. It was initially in Pergamos after the fall of Babylon. When Babylon fell, the Chaldeans were chased out. This later became one of the 7 churches of Asia, following the death of Belshazzar and the expulsion of the Chaldean priesthood from Babylon by the Medo-Persian kings. This seat was established in Pergamos. For many centuries, it served as Satan's seat, literally called Satan's seat, as we see in Revelation 2:13. So with the favor of the deified kings of Pergamos, this location was assumed to be Satan's preferred abode. The idea of a king having some divine nature goes all the way back to the time of Noah, right after the flood, when Queen Semiramis, which was Nimrod's wife, uh, when she had her son, and it was supposed to be after the death of Nimrod, it was thought that he had the kind of like the reincarnation of the spirit of Nimrod into Tammuz, their son. And so this is what is known as the mystery. Mystery meaning the hidden presence, the hidden spiritual presence. So what was being hidden was the spirit of Nimrod. It was hidden. His presence was hidden inside Tammuz. Then in a kind of a form of reincarnation. And so later on, you would have the representation of Tammuz, which was a piece of bread that was in the shape of the sun because he was associated with the sun god, which would be a round wafer marked with a T for Tammuz. Okay. The idea was that in that form of communion, that the presence of God was hidden inside that wafer. Does this sound familiar to us? Okay. If you go to a Roman Catholic Mass now, you hear the body of Christ, and you look on that's a wafer marked with a T, it's round. Okay, that's not what they had at the Last Supper. This round wafer is not some evolution of the Last Supper. It is a something that was brought over from that pagan system. Remember, the word mystery means the hidden presence of the divine in the physical elements. So when the Catholic Church says, "Don't question the mystery of your faith," what they're actually referring to is this mysterious presence in the Mass, where they are saying they are turning Christ, turning the wafer and the wine into the body and blood of Christ. They are making it hidden there. It's an unbloody sacrifice. Yeah, so it's not really, there's no real blood involved, but well, it's transformed into the blood of Christ because his presence is hidden in there. Miss Nancy, yes. Oh, hang on. Go ahead. Your microphone is not on, hon. Is it on for sure? No, is your microphone actually on? It's not registering here. Well, try the black microphone. Okay, that's good.
Okay, years ago, I seem to remember reading that Nimrod was supposed to have died, and then like it wasn't like, oh, my husband died and I'm pregnant. It was like 13 months later.
Yeah.
Semiramis had Tammuz, and then it was claimed that it was some sort of a virgin birth.
Right. Yes, that was also part of it. I didn't do that part this time, but yeah, you're right.
So that's long before Mary gives birth to Jesus. And right. I'm thinking, because as Brother Joe goes over these things in Sunday school, and I sit there thinking, what damage would it have done to Catholicism to say, yeah, Mary and Joseph had a normal marriage. They had other children after Jesus was born. Why do they camp on this thing that she was ever virgin? And I think we discussed it one time in class that it's like borrowed from the pagans.
Yeah.
That there's just something about this. And I'm thinking it has its roots here.
Yes,
obviously,
definitely.
He was, I mean, Tammuz was the product of her with some other guy, and she's just conveniently saying, "Oh, this is a miracle."
Yeah, yeah. And it's because Satan is counterfeiting it so he can siphon people off.
He's counterfeiting it even before it happened.
Right.
Hundreds and hundreds of years later, it's going to happen, but he knows.
Right.
He knows. I mean, back in Genesis, the prediction that the Savior would come. he somehow was privy to at least a big part of God's plan. And I think that even when Herod made the declaration that all the male children, this was satanically inspired to try to eliminate
Yeah.
Christ. And I'm wondering if, because Satan doesn't know everything, maybe he was also inspired when Moses was born, because maybe that was the deliverer he thought might have been the Messiah, to try to wipe him out too.
Yeah.
I think he has the same playbook.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. Keep in mind that somebody might wonder, well, why does the Catholic Church insist on having Mary being elevated? Why do they insist on having nuns? Why do they insist on to what advantage is it for them to talk about the perpetual virginity of Mary?
That always bothered me.
Okay. And the reason why, it's actually of no advantage or disadvantage to them. What it is, it's an advantage that Satan tries to get, because it's a way to destroy and a way to corrupt Christianity. It's a way to corrupt true faith in order to distract people from properly worshiping God. Here's how it is a corruption, and here's why it is to his advantage. We want to remember that with Satan, one of the things that he takes advantage of greatly is sexuality, and if he can corrupt that, yeah, let me go through it first, and then I'll let. Okay, because yeah, okay. So anything that's going on with this transgenderism today, with homosexuality before that, with promoting feminism before that, all of this is a way of trying to corrupt sexuality. The sexual freedom, the sexual revolution of the '60s, all that coming about is because it's a way to get people obsessed with their physicality and self, as opposed to surrendering to God. So now the connection to that is this: that when you have it becomes like an overall scheme to promote essentially goddess worship. Back in the pagan times, in the pagan temples, sexuality was a chief component of their worship. There would be many phallic symbols that would be utilized, and to be the central part of their worship. It's like their worship was a big orgy. When you look at what Moses was dealing with and Joshua going into the land, the reason why the land was to be cleared out of the people is because this sexual immorality had gotten so entrenched that they were justified in getting rid of them. Think of what happened with Sodom and Gomorrah. So you had this big sexuality issue that was going on. One of the things that was a part of the orgy aspect was that they would have in the temples temple prostitutes. They were called the Vestal Virgins. Okay, they were not virgins at all. What they were prostitutes that were for hire, and their hire would go into supporting the maintenance of the pagan temple. You had this problem coming up into the modern times, even over in India. In India, in these very modern times, you had this problem of young women, young girls, being prostituted out for the support of the Indian temples over there in India. So if you have, let's go back to our friends, the Stoics and the Gnostics, where they look at the world as evil, as opposed to the spiritual being good. They would tend to associate sexuality with sin. Now, if you can, and for good reason, because it was all part of the pagan temple system. So if you have the temple prostitutes, if you have this corruption of sexuality, if you have this emphasis on then goddess worship as behind this, now you've got something that you can bring over into the church, and you can next see why Mary would be elevated as perpetually virgin. So they were considered the temple virgins, which they were not. This also goes with the idea of saint. Sometimes when I go to teach about the word saint, I'll point out saint only means separated unto God, for separation, for holiness, meaning separation. Holiness, the context of Christianity, talks about the transcendence of God and how he is beyond all that we are. His love is beyond our love. His righteousness is beyond our righteousness. That's what we mean when we say it transcends it. Well, the word saint could be applied elsehow. The pagan prostitutes, the temple prostitutes, were called saints because they were separated for the purpose of the pagan temple. This is why when you're reading your scriptures, you're just casually reading along about the saints of the Lord, and and you say, well, why do you have to say saints of the Lord? Well, because you had to distinguish from the saints of the pagan temples, which were entirely different. So we are holy unto the Lord. So now, so what you've got is this emphasis on this female worship in Mary, goddess worship, which is associated with that, this whole virgin thing, which is why when you look at the priests and the nuns, going through the struggles they are, it's, they're forbidden marriage. And so now you've got a bunch of twisted things going on there in Catholicism. And so it all comes together to be just a general perversion of things in order to distract people from God, to get them into their physicality instead. Okay, all pulled together. Nancy, yes, in the context of that.
Yeah, it fits right in with a thought that I had. I remember right about the time I was trying to put things together as a, say, child who knew things before.
Yeah.
I probably should have. I always heard about sex in some negative way, and I mean, people would even to this day say, do the nasty and all those things, like this was something horrible. And I remembered hearing this, even in Catholicism, that, and I said to my mother, well, if this is supposed to happen between a husband and wife, and this is how what makes the world go round, because this is how people are born into the world, why is this looked down on as something that's dirty or bad, or that God does not approve of this? And she really didn't know. But that the Catholics will use scripture when it's advantageous to what and they'll twist it to mean something else. Now, we know that when David says in Psalm 51, verse 5, behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. We understand this to mean that we all inherited the sin nature from Adam. But to the casual reader, this was twisted like, well, in sin did my mother conceive me. I mean, my parents obviously had to do this this is why I'm here. And I was so confused by this, because if God sanctioned it and it's holy and right, why is it sinful? Why is there this perception that it's so bad? And although she didn't have the answer, it's now learning about the church history and how Satan loves to just ruin anything that God sets up as holy. And this is why Satan's on this mission to tear down the family,
Right.
which is really nothing new. It's just that more people are embracing his lies. Because it looks like, well, when a woman conceives, this is a result of sin all the time when it happens. So I guess they really had to keep Mary from ever having engaged in normal relations with her husband, so that she could be this
a goddess figure.
A goddess figure. And they really can't account for anything else that contradicts that in the scriptures.
Yeah. So again, no real advantage to the Catholic Church to do that. It's just that it's part of this overall scheme and system to corrupt sexuality, and which is a powerful force in order to draw people away from God. And by the way, also, this now also figures into infant baptism. How in the world you make that connection? Well, here's the connection. Okay. If sexuality is considered sinful, and this is going to come out later on in the book. I'm pretty sure it's in there. The idea of childbirth then becomes sinful. So now you've got to wash away those sins. So baptism, that's one of the excuses for baptizing infants. Again, this whole system, all these ideas linked together lead to the perversion of sexuality and and then on into infant baptism and just a whole host of things there. Like I said, perversion of sexuality, okay, goddess worship, and in fact, you have places today where in churches that they're not Christian churches. Okay, they're churches. Okay, they use the word Christ, as far as being Christian, but they're just churches that will, in the interest of feminism, will promote goddess worship as well, and God becomes female as well as male, and they'll pray to Mother God as well. Uh, and you'll see it in like supposedly cute little ways on some movie where some kid's praying praising ends up with amen, and then he says a woman also because he wants to make sure he covers his bases. So, uh, which has nothing to do with anything as far as men or women. Okay, so yeah, so it's a big mess. Okay, anything else? I'm going to continue on. Okay, so let's see. Okay, paragraph 275. Oh no, just before that. Initially, there was no direct link between the Roman pontiff and Pergamos. The two hierarchies seemed separate. However, over time, the Roman pontificate and that of Pergamos became intertwined. We're talking about the Roman pagan pontificate, and of Pergamos became entwined. Pergamos itself became part of the Roman Empire with Attalus III, who was the final king of Pergamos. He bequeathed all his dominions to the Roman people in 133 BC. And with that comes over his title of Pontifex Maximus. So, paragraph 275. After the kingdom of Pergamos merged with the Roman dominions, there was no one openly claiming the full dignity of the old title, which was held by the king of Pergamos. The authority of the Roman pontiffs had also been curtailed. Yet when Julius Caesar, who was both Pontifex Maximus and emperor, became the supreme civil ruler and head of the Roman religion, he gained the powers and functions of the legitimate Babylonian pontiff. So the Babylonian pontiff, the high priest of the Babylonian mystery religions, became officially claimed by Caesar. Paragraph 276, Julius Caesar seemingly asserted these powers. He may have even claimed the divine status of Attalus, along with the kingdom that Attalus had left to the Romans. His well-known watchword, Venus Genetrix, suggested that Venus was the mother of the Julian lineage, implying that he was the son of the great goddess. This positioned him as a central figure in both the Roman state and religion. Okay, so now we come down to the times of the Caesars. So you can see it has, with the fall of the Babylonian Empire, the Chaldeans were expelled over to Pergamos. They brought with them the title Pontifex Maximus. This becomes the seat of the seat of Satan, the seat of the Babylonian mystery religions. When Rome takes over Pergamos, that seat is then transferred to them, and so the whole system of the priests of the pagan religions is now combined with the Pontifex Maximus title. Caesar's got it, and we're off to the races. Okay, paragraph 277 on top of page 118. Julius Caesar, as the Pontifex Maximus of Rome, held a unique religious and political position within the Roman Republic. The title of Pontifex Maximus was the highest religious office in ancient Rome, overseeing the religious rituals, festivals, and ceremonies. While the primary role of the Pontifex Maximus was related to religious matters, Caesar and other Roman leaders also recognized the political influence that came with the position. By holding, so now you can see where the idea of a pope is coming about. Okay, so what you've got is the this office being united with the head of government. By holding this position, Caesar was seen as a custodian of religious traditions and a mediator between the Roman people and the gods. Caesar used his role as Pontifex Maximus to perform and oversee religious rituals, festivals, and ceremonies that were important to the Roman people. Caesar's political ambitions extended beyond his religious role. He leveraged his authority as Pontifex Maximus to forge alliances, build networks, and cultivate relationships with influential individuals and groups. As the Pontifex Maximus, Caesar had the authority to shape and influence religious practices. He could introduce reforms, make decisions about the construction of temples, and oversee the calendar of religious festivals. It gave him a degree of control over the religious and cultural life of Rome. This is what the popes are going to do.
When did the calendar that we currently use come into play? What, like, I'm seeing these years you've got up there, and I know that there are people that still hold to a different calendar.
Well, the Gregorian calendar, I can't remember the year. If somebody wants to Google it to find out what it was, the Gregorian calendar was something that came in much later. It was a correction because of the lunar calendar problems that were generated. But I don't know that it has impact.
A lot of things, like a lot of holidays that we have,
Yeah.
aren't they sort of put on the calendar because of Rome?
Yeah, sure.
Even today now.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. The tradition of the Roman empires as Pontifex Maximus continued on after Julius Caesar. Caesar Augustus, he held the title. He used it to reinforce his authority and project an image of religious devotion. He saw himself as the restorer of traditional values and sought to maintain the religious institutions of the state. Tiberius, the second Roman emperor, he also assumed the role of Pontifex Maximus. Caligula, who was infamous for his erratic behavior, also held the title. And his rule was marked by extravagance and authoritarian tendencies. Claudius became emperor after Caligula's assassination. He continued holding the tradition, the traditional title. He focused on administrative and legal reforms. Nero was another emperor who assumed the title. Domitian, the last emperor of the Flavian dynasty, also held the title of Pontifex Maximus, and his rule was marked by increasing autocracy and a focus on maintaining imperial authority. So now, and the purpose of looking at all these emperors like this is to demonstrate that, yes, this is getting very much entrenched in the head of the Roman government. Pontifex Maximus, using that title as the excuse for their authority, bolstered not only their political authority, but their religious authority over the people. So page 119, the Pope as Pontifex Maximus. We come down to 366 AD, 366 to 384. Pope Damasus I, this is paragraph 278. He was the first to claim the title of Pontifex Maximus. It had previously been associated only with the Roman emperors and their religious roles. This was not something that was utilized in the church at all. You did not have this title. Damasus' role in this regard was part of his broader efforts to assert the spiritual authority of the papacy and to establish the Bishop of Rome as a central figure in matters of faith and doctrine. In other words, he's got competition from all these other patriarchs in all these other cities, in Jerusalem and Antioch and Alexandria, and Constantinople. Okay, by adopting the title Pontifex Maximus, Damasus sought to emphasize the spiritual leadership of the Pope and align it with the role of guiding the church in matters of religious practice and doctrine. Paragraph 279. One of the primary challenges that Damasus faced was the existence of rival claimants to the papal throne. Other people, thought, no, I should be the Bishop of Rome. No, I should be. His election was contested by a faction that was supporting a deacon named Ursinus, leading to a schism within the Roman Church. The political turmoil associated with this schism created a need for Damasus to assert his authority and legitimacy as the rightful pope. The situation escalated to the point where violence and unrest erupted in Rome. So the emperor comes into play now. Paragraph 280. Emperor Gratian intervened in the conflict. He sided with Pope Damasus. Gratian recognized Damasus as the legitimate Pope of Rome, and he provided imperial support for his claim to the papacy. This support not only helped stabilize the situation in Rome, but also affirmed Damasus' position as the recognized spiritual leader of the Roman Christian community. The title of Pontifex Maximus had a historical association with the Roman emperors who held both political and religious power. By adopting the title, Damasus aimed to assert the authority of the papacy over religious matters to counter the claims of his rivals. So Damasus justified his use of the title by aligning it with the authority of Peter, who they considered to be the founder of the Roman Church there. He presented himself as Peter's successor and thus the legitimate spiritual leader. Damasus positioned the papacy as a central authority for religious guidance and orthodoxy, and this was at a time when the power of the emperors was waning. Okay, so the use of the title by the popes became standard, even though it did not have a biblical origin. Okay, so this is when the title Pontifex Maximus is claimed, because he's trying to usurp this from the Roman emperor. And I am not seeing it in my notes exactly. I'm going to say, from what I remember, that the emperor supported this stand. Okay, the emperors were looking to actually, at this point, because they're very much Christianized in many regards, he was looking to divest himself of this title because he saw that he was not necessarily the spiritual head. He had some spiritual sense about him, and said, "Well, no, you take it." Now it wasn't, and it didn't become very well established at the time. It's just this is the first time it's used. It will become strengthened as time goes on, that the Pope would be considered the Pontifex Maximus. Final word on it is the word Pontifex Maximus means the high priest, pontiff meaning bridge or bridge builder. And so there's bridging from people to God. And so he becomes the high priest in place of Jesus Christ being the high priest. Miss Nancy.
Now, you mentioned before that this title really wasn't used in the church yet. This was
Correct.
just given to the emperors.
Damasus was the first one.
So how did the church let them get away with calling emperors priests?
They didn't. It's not that they let them get away with it. It was just sort of commonly understood, because this is like parts of what 1,200 years of history of the emperors and the heads of the heads of the state carrying this title.
I guess a better question would be, why would secular emperors want to use the word priest?
Well, because of this sense of the divine nature of kings, okay, feeling themselves either descended from the gods or incarnated, or deity incarnated in them.
I thought that they would cite the divine right of kings as my authority has been given by God, but that they said that they themselves were gods is a little different matter.
Okay, it was common. Okay.
Pastor?
Let me carry on for a moment with this, because it's a concept here. They have the divine right of kings is something that was established later on as a Christian principle. Okay, using Romans 13, that was a very appropriate issue in the culture, in the church and state later on. The Great one. And well, in England, but not only in England, but elsewhere too. Remember that the mystery is the big deal, the hidden presence. So for them, they would have, they would be looking for uh, the power of deity associated with their office. This was a common thing. If you remember, Jesus talked about how the Gentiles exercise lordship over the people, but for them, it was not supposed to be. If you can maybe do a Bible search on that for me real quick.
Which word?
The Gentiles, keywords, Gentiles and lordship. This is a little bit different than I'm thinking of. Okay. Oh, that was the occasion. Okay. When it says they exercise lordship, what he's referring to is how that lordship was divine, divine power. That's what Christ was referring to. The Gentiles have this idea of divinity in their leaders exercised over them, but the Christians were not going to have that. Do you have the
Yeah, I have one in Mark and one in Luke.
probably either one, I'll bet.
And Luke, it's in 22:25, it says, and he said unto them, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and they that exercise authority upon them are called benefactors. And the Mark passage says, but Jesus called unto him and saith unto them, you know that they which are accounted to rule over the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and their great ones exercise authority upon them.
Yeah, that's not just a reference to them having authority over them. The kings exercise lordship. They exercise divine power over the people is what Christ is referring to. Are you able to read the next verse after either one of those?
But so shall it not be named among you, but whosoever will be great among you shall be your minister, and whosoever of you will be the chiefest shall be servant of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many.
So you wouldn't have popes or other bishops exercising this lordship over the people, claiming this divine nature. Yes, let me go back to Stanley. I hope I didn't steal anything that you were going to say in there.
Oh no, I just had an idea. I guess I'm addressing you and my sister. I guess trying to make sense out of it, trying to understand. For example, we in the military, not in the military, the president of the United States. We could have a president who never served in the military at all, no military experience. He becomes president. He also holds the title of top soldier, commander in chief of the armed forces without any experience whatsoever. So I'm wondering if that's more of what it is with that Pope being a placeholder or a title holder.
I could see a connection there. I could see a connection in that. I'd be pressed to try to pull it out, but yeah, you're saying like it's by virtue of their office they get to hold this title.
Yes, because no one in the military ever disrespects a president being a chief of the armed forces, or well, until now, and being the top soldier, considered the top soldier before in past history, it's just accepted. So I'm wondering if there had to be someone considered the top, in those days, in that respect, and they were given that title.
Yeah, and I would actually say, even though, yes, it might be by virtue of their office, they might have been able to have that title Pontifex Maximus from the emperors. The emperors did not mind utilizing that and taking advantage of it, and even claiming that they actually were divine, because with the president, commander in chief, there's no divine aspect included in that. So yeah, so the emperors, they were very surprised that they would use anything for power, but they did. Yeah, Nancy, go ahead. And then Brother Tone.
So the secular emperors were all too happy to have both control of the government and religion. And then the religious leaders were happy to have control over religion as well as
Yeah.
the government.
Yeah. And by that time, the emperors were more willing to be having some Christian sense about them. They were more willing to say, yeah, we shouldn't be doing this. Yeah, go ahead, you take it. And it becomes more firmly established after that. Damascus was the first, and it becomes more established after that. Brother Tone, see if we can. Let's make this working. Testing. Okay, it's working now. Oops, sort of working.
Yeah, well, maybe we superimpose the context. Satan is at work all the time, and he is the master of counterfeiter.
Yes.
He counterfeits the offices that Jesus holds of being king, priest, and prophet.
Yeah.
So these are being instruments of Satan. They would duplicate that. Originally, if we go back to the judges, for example, it was direct theocracy.
Yeah.
The Jews were a peculiar people in that they were not like all the other nations of the world who are ruled by despots or kings and monarchs. And because the preparation was supposed to be for the Jehovah himself to be able in Jesus to be able to be the king at the end times. But then Satan is always at work, so he will always pervert the desires of men to rule over others. That's why the Jesus message was that in the case if you're Christian, if you're a believer, that's not so, because we serve rather than exercise power over.
Right.
So these kingdoms that we are now studying are a result of this demonic schedule
Yeah.
for his usurpation until it culminates in today's global tendencies,
Right.
and then usher in the Antichrist.
Yeah, the global tendencies which are going to be used by Antichrist, and all of these systems are going to come together finally in the Antichrist. Because remember, what are we looking for? The mystery Babylon, the Great Whore, in Revelation 17. Okay, it's all going to come together, and that'll be goddess worship, and it'll be utilized big time then, all to supplant God, the true God. Okay, well, this has been a mouthful for today. Okay, I recommend reviewing some of these things, and the takeaway from all of this is to see that is to see the depth of the pagan intrusion into Christianity. This is going to be the force for the next 1,000 years until you get to the Reformation. So when you get to the Reformation, it's like you can see why everything would just be blown wide open, because you've got all these pagan influences. The reformers regularly recognize the Pope as Antichrist, not necessarily as the Antichrist, but as Antichrist in spirit. John says there are many Antichrists already. Okay, I think that will do it for today. One more, go ahead.
I just want to insert Paul, because Nero is one of those that claim what they call this divine powers.
Yeah.
Paul initially was allowed by Nero to operate, right? And if he was confined, he had influence even on the staff. Many of them converted, even family members. But then when he realized that Paul was talking about another power, that's Jesus, and he's supposed to be king, then he started to worry, and then he committed all those atrocious acts, including the burning of Rome, and blamed it on Christians.
Yeah.
So I wonder what would have given them the Catholics to think that they are they are claiming that Peter is the head, when all along it was Paul really in operation on all those Gentile nations.
That's one that's pretty well explained in the book Two Babylons. It was uh it was again a pagan influence. I can't remember the exact connection, but if you go to Two Babylons, Hislop does a good explanation about why it was worthwhile to use him. So it was a combination of his um, just the fact that he was powerful, or was significant leader, combined with a pagan perversion of the whole position, and it was more easily placed on Peter than on Paul.